Got a question for you guys. Do you know if your self-talk is sabotaging your success? Join me today for a discussion about how we tell our personal story and how that may be impacting your bottom line. Hey guys, it's Amy Hager. I'm a registered dietitian. I'm self-employed. I have a few different businesses, but one of them is private practice as a dietitian. And if you have done any amount of meditation or psychotherapy work, you are well aware of that inner dialogue that runs through our head throughout the day. Most of the time, it's just a random series of thoughts, and it helps us process the day, but sometimes that dialogue can actually be telling a story. Sometimes that dialogue is supportive, and at other times it can be destructive. So my hope is to bring awareness to this inner dialogue, help you to understand if the story that you're telling yourself is supportive to your success and if it's working against you. So first things first, we all can agree that the inner dialogue is a normal process. It's how we make sense of the world. It's how we process what's happening throughout our lives. And interestingly, there's several different cognitive distortions that can make this inner dialogue become negative and unsupportive. So examples are all or nothing thinking, overgeneralization, and catastrophizing, just to name a few. But aside from the terminology, I want to encourage you to take a look at your actual story or a narrative that you tell about yourself in your professional journey. We may not realize it, but a strong narrative can have a pretty convincing effect. Just look at the media and social media, and something doesn't even have to be true or accurate to receive a tremendous reaction. I think you can agree on that. And in the same way, we're constantly telling a story about our own selves, even if we're not consciously aware of it. And our friends and our family might be more aware of the story that we're telling because we tend to vocalize our story to them as we have conversations together. And I've found that the more that I tell a story about being frustrated, the more that my story involves aspects of failure or being challenged constantly, the more obsessed I end up feeling about what is going wrong with my work or my life. Alternatively, once I shift that narrative to one that is a little bit more supportive, meaning like a little bit more positive spin, the more empowered that I feel. And I feel like this is independent of current circumstances. Our brains have a natural negativity bias that can take a little bit of training to sort of overcome that tendency to talk about what's wrong, what's bad. Positivity, appreciative inquiry, critical thinking, those can be effective tools in sort of mitigating that negativity bias over time. But it definitely takes a lot of practice. The more that we shift ourselves into telling a supportive story, as long as it isn't like blatantly false or hard to believe, the better that we can position ourselves for success. It's not really Pollyanna-ish thinking. It's constructing a story that highlights the best of your strengths and the best of what's actually happening. So let's review some examples. Let's say that someone's asking you how your business is going. It's a really broad question, and you could respond in a lot of different ways. But do you tend to answer people when they ask this question with a swath of problems, challenges and frustrations, listing the most recent disappointment? How do you tend to respond to those kind of questions? Or is it that you tend to sort of gloss over the details saying, oh, it's just fine, but listening to that inner dialogue in your head, listening to all of those issues that you aren't happy with and sort of doubting yourself, both of those are examples of an unsupportive narrative. One, you're speaking the narrative, and two, you're not speaking it, but you're thinking it. But it's where your mind goes first. You kind of go to the negative, and it's pretty natural. I mean, we're constantly exposed to the negative with the media, and a lot of our conversations sort of gravitate towards the bad stuff. So we have to overcome this. How do you move that narrative in a more supportive direction? Here's another way to say it. So somebody asks you, how's your business going? And you know that there's been challenges. I think a more constructive way to sort of respond to that is, I'm learning so much in this past year, or I'm constantly stimulated and I'm learning from the challenges that I get to overcome. Or I've been surprised and delighted by the twists and turns of being a business owner. So you're not selling them or telling them like a false story, but you're not harping on the negative aspects of what's been happening. So you're kind of spinning that in a way where you're still getting a positive outcome, where you're learning, you're being stimulated, and just acknowledging the fact that being a business owner has its ups and downs. Now, when you're alone with your thoughts, reflecting on your career, what are you telling yourself? How do you describe how it's going? Are these narratives even true? And what are some of the shifts that you could make to feel better about your inner dialogue? So when you're not talking with somebody and you're thinking about your business, how are you framing that in your mind? One narrative I can get derailed by is this one. Nothing seems to work. I can't make any progress, in response to feelings like things are progressing slowly. One way to combat that inner narrative is to look at the opposite of that negative thought, which is actually true. Things are working. They are progressing. It's just that I'm wanting quicker results. So instead of telling a story that's not true, nothing seems to work, I can't make any progress, which is literally a false statement, actually doing a more supportive reframe is the way to handle that. So things are working and they are progressing. It's just that I'm wanting quicker results. It's not helpful for me to continue an untrue, unsupportive, negative dialogue about it. So training yourself to stop that dialogue, stop telling that narrative, is the way to reframe your mind for success. We all do it, and my challenge is to see if you can catch it and if you can do something to lessen it. So here's 2 things that you can do to try to combat that negative narrative. So 1 is to dispute the thought in real time. So your mental story is telling you something that's probably not true, right? So here comes your negative thought. You can literally talk back to your inner critic. If you hear a noticeably untrue, critical thought pop up, vocalize the opposite of it. State the opposite of the negative thought so that you can help disrupt the momentum of the thought train and not let it spin another story to go down the rabbit hole of negative thinking. So the thought is, I'm not making any money this month. Totally false. That is not true. You are making money. So if that thought is popping up, I would stop and say, you are such a liar. That is not true at all. And so that could be a way to talk back to your inner critic. A little bit silly, but it actually stops you from going down thought trains without having any control over it. The fact that it's silly is what works about it. And number 2, the other technique that you can use to disrupt the negative narrative is to practice expressing gratitude or appreciation, and that can help thwart negative narratives. So one way to do this is to take a moment at the end of the day. And in fact, my daily planner actually has a spot for this, reflecting on what went well. In fact, the entry says, what went well today? So I can actually fill that in. At the end of every day, taking time to reflect back and appreciate something that went well, because something did go well in your day. You just have to determine and figure out what that is. Even if you aren't where you want to be, even if some disappointing events occurred, there's always something you can be grateful toward. Practicing appreciation can help train the brain out of negative thought patterns and generate more momentum towards supportive thinking. So I'm hoping that this discussion was helpful in getting you thinking critically about how you talk to yourself, the story that you tell about yourself, the story that you tell about your success or your business, encouraging a shift towards a more positive and supportive storytelling. We can produce more momentum in a growth mindset, which is critical in career and personal success. So I'd love to hear from you guys. Do you get derailed by negative thoughts? Finding yourself going down that negative path of thought trains, and does that keep you from making advances in your career. Leave me a comment below and let me know what you're going to try this week to stop the negative train. And feel free to stop by my website if you're interested in more information on career advice. We'll see you in the next video, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, guys. Be sure to catch the latest video here. And don't forget to subscribe if you'd like to see more videos on private practice and being self-employed as a dietitian.